Okay, this is Five Live. We've been promising you George MacKay, and very fortuitously, now it's George MacKay time. Hello, George.
Hey Simon, how you doing?
I'm all right. Well, I'm in my bedroom, a spare bedroom, and Mark's in a cupboard.
Right, well, I'm in this sort of, I guess, like a little study room. So I've got a wee table and a lamp here, so I'm feeling very professional.
Right. And where are you for lockdown, George?
I'm actually with my parents. We're all kind of locked down as a family, so I'm with everyone here.
And how is it in lockdown? Is your phone ringing all the time with people saying they want you to be in movies? Are you writing things? Are you coming up with? Is it being very creative, or are you just playing board games?
It's all right. It's a sort of mixture of lots of stuff. Like it's lovely. It's lovely being with the family, and obviously I've not. I don't live at home anymore and stuff. So we kind of this is the most time I've spent with my family, with my parents and my sister, and all of our kind of loved ones for since Christmas really, and never for this amount of time. So we're catching up on all of that, and then yeah, quite a lot of reading. Quite a lot of reading to do with work or possible projects, and yeah, and a few sort of ideas which I've had myself, which my excuse is never having time for, and now
There
all
you
we
have.
have is time. So yeah, just kind of plugging away at a few different things at once.
So obviously, we want to talk about 1917, which is out on DVD, Tribute of the Kelly Gang, which is going to streaming in June. But just before we get there, what Mark and I have been discussing a lot for the last few weeks, and I'm sure you and your professional colleagues are as well when you hook up with them, is trying to work out how it all starts up again. How do movies and TV shows begin to film again? What are you hearing? I don't know when you're going to be working again next. No one really knows that. But how do you think your industry will emerge from all of this?
I think it will be. I think there will be I think very gradual steps, and I think that there will be a sort of series of trial and error in that. In terms of, I think first we've got to take in the kind of the rules and the logistics of the situation, and then see what effect that has on the creative work. So like social distancing on a set, and what that means for if the makeup artist needs to go in and do their checks, or even when you're playing a scene, like it's so tricky kind of having one set of rules for a whole crew, and not everyone being able to adhere to them. Say like in a scene you've got to be sort of like if there's a kissing scene, for instance, anything like that. I think we're going to have to just take baby steps and see what we can see, if how we can continue to make good work whilst sort of adhering to those rules, and then see where it needs, I guess, some reshaping. But I think
Yeah.
it would just, I think maybe it'd be easier for smaller productions, because you could almost quarantine somewhat in the making of the film. Like if you go to a location, I think everything will be stripped back a lot as well in terms of the locations used, the sets used, where people are staying, because there's this bigger thing than all of us, and so I think everything will perhaps be a bit kind of more localized in terms of even the crews used, the locations that you go to keeping everything as close to home as possible to limit travel and all of those things too. So I think travel is such a huge part of the film industry and film and telly. So I think that will be a big thing that will shift. But in terms of the immediate incremental steps, I think it will be, I think we'll have to do it like everyone else. Observe social
Yeah.
distancing and PPE for the crew, for as for the whole time basically. I think.
I was thinking, Mark, because the last time we were talking, well, we always talk about Georgia a lot
We do.
on the program. But when you were at Shetland, when you were at the Shetland Film Festival, even that kind of, because you're in the same proximity all the time in the same studio and so on, that's going to have to be rethought as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, the interesting thing was, George, when you were up there in Shetland, which was lovely, thank you for coming to the film festival, and you're always welcome back again. And you and I ended up broadcasting in this tiny little room, because Radio Shetland is quite small, and we were in the small studio,
Yeah.
and for various reasons, the only way they could make it work was that George had to sit right next to me with a pair of headphones on that were feeding back, so he had to tie a jumper round his head to stop the headphones feeding back. But my main memory of that was, and correct me if I'm wrong, I said to you, "What are you doing next?" And you said, "It said, well, something's just come up." And I think that you got the role in Kelly Gang whilst you were in Shetland, because I think that you said, I don't want to say this because I don't want to nix it, but I think this is about to happen. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, well, it wasn't. I hadn't. I don't think I'd even got the 100% okay yet. I think the film's financing was kind of a bit rocky to begin with, and I'd auditioned a number of weeks before, and I'd had a really sort of wild audition with Justin, and it was like it's the craziest audition I've ever had, and because
Tell
of
us
that
about it. What
experience,
happened?
oh, just like Justin's way of directing is just like nothing else. Like I went in. And it was a joy. It was I felt like I'd been put through my paces more in that hour than I had done years before. Just because, and we had this concentrated hour because also I was working on another film in Prague and flew in that morning and got to Liverpool Street Station from the Stansted Express at I think 10 to 9, and I had the audition we had between 9 and 10, and then I had to leave bang on 10 to get on a flight at 11:30 to get back for rehearsals that afternoon. And so we sort of came with this energy because I'd literally run from the station, and we got straight into it. And Des Hamilton, who was casting it, wasn't in the room for the very first scene, and Justin said, should we go straight into it? And I said, yeah. And I was reading opposite this woman and who was part of Des's team. And it's a scene between Ned and his mum when he comes back home. And at the time we were playing him Irish as well, as his accent actually would have been. And so I was sort of playing, I guess, quite a standard back and forth between him and his mum of, you've been away, where have you been? I don't know, trying to play this kind of brooding bloke. And Justin just went, no. Okay, put the script down and just look at her and say everything that you find beautiful about her, truly, as you. And I was kind of thinking, okay. And so I did, and I talked about her lips and her neck and her eyes and how it made me feel and how beautiful she was. And he went, okay, right, now you're in that zone. This is just, let go of the scene. You're on a first date. You guys are on a first date. And you're kind of playing, is this kind of like, what's going on here? Am I making you laugh? Is that a good smile, or are you laughing at me? You're trying to poke fun, get a reaction, like this little back and forth, that dance of when you're flirting with someone. And so we started, he said, but use the words from the scene. So we started playing the scene like that. And immediately, like, he gave you a truth and a context, which when you then slap mother and son on top of that, gives it a whole different vibe. And that was like the first scene. And then Des turned up and he said, right, this next scene, which was a kind of a speech that was done in the original draft, was him just sat around a campfire, and it was quite talking to his army of boys, but it was quite low key. And he said, go on, do the speech. And so I did. And he said, as you know, so first he said, Des is going to say and do some stuff just before you read this. So just don't do anything, but just take what he gives you. And when he sits in the chair, deliver the speech to him. So I was like, okay. And then Des immediately comes up to me and starts putting his head into my head and pressing, going, you're nothing, get out of here, you're nothing, go on, go out of here. And he's like, starts kind of butting his head against mine and starts riling me up. And I was thinking, okay. And then we drop, and then he sits down and I delivered the scene, and it kind of petered out a wee bit. And Justin just went, right, 20 press-ups, go. So I'm doing these press-ups, and he stood over me going, right, this is what's going on in your head. This is what you want to do. This is what you're going to do to him. Now get to the wall. And I stood to the wall, and we hadn't sort of stopped since I'd walked in the room. And he just put my head against the wall and just held it there and just look at him, look at Des, look at him, and was pressing my head into the wall. I goes, keep looking at him, go again, boom. And then, so I went into the next scene and like into the scene again, and it kind of got into a zone. He's like, all right, stay in that now, improvise this. Tell him what you're going to do if he doesn't do what you want. What he does that, and it turned into this real dark kind of improvisation. And it was just like every scene, he flipped it on its head. There was the next scene that was another speech to a sort of standard speech of call to arms. He was like, no, it's on your body. You've gone insular. Like, map the journey that you're talking about on the veins on your chest. Go on, just map it out and talk to yourself. It's all in your head. And he just like blew my mind with the interpretation of these scenes and this character. And so I'd had this audition that was like the most glorious kind of acting sort of experience. And then it didn't hear, and it's the money's up and down, they're not sure what's going on. And so it was waiting for that, and I'd heard some positive news, I think, when I was up in Shetland as to like, Justin would really like you to do it, but we're waiting on a couple of things. And so I just didn't want to say anything because I wanted it more than anything. So it was, sorry, that's a long answer to it. It was around that time.
I think we're getting a sense, George, as to why you've said before that this was the most exhausting film that you've ever shot. And just listening to you talking about one or two scenes has been draining just for everyone listening.
Yeah, it was kind of like, it was wild. Like Justin just offered the opportunity for everyone to go in, like really, really go in, and there was so much improvisation, and we were just sort of like lost in the world of it. Like we did so much stuff. I went out to Australia for a long time before the film, that then and then the money fell through. Actually, with all of that up and down, I went out and spent a couple of months in Australia, and I lived with Justin and Essie, who played my mum, and I was all over. I lived on a farm. I did, went and chopped wood in Tasmania, went near sort of up from where Justin lived, and then just because we were about to come do it in January, the money fell through. So I came home, and then when we came back to it, there was this real hunger from everyone because it was there and it got taken away. And one thing Justin said as well, as part of the, to get the vibe of these guys, because he said, I always see him as a punk band, is he said, I've booked you. We had a 4-week rehearsal process when we were all there, and he said, I booked you a gig in Melbourne in a bar, and I want you boys to write some songs, and you've got to come up with a band and a set and play this gig just in your own right. so we did, and that was like our rehearsal for 3 weeks, was to go into the production office, put a dress on, and jam punk songs. So it was like, it was wild.
So we mentioned the History of Kelly Gang is appearing on streaming services from June. We also should mention 1917, which is out on DVD. Just before we go any further, let's just play a clip, just because it's such a great film, and it would be nice just to remember this scene, which kicks off, of course, with your man Colin Firth. Here we go.
Colonel Mackenzie is in command of the 2nd. He sent word yesterday morning he was going after the retreating Germans. He is convinced he has them on the run. That if he can break their lines now, he will turn the tide. He is wrong. Colonel Mackenzie has not seen these aerials of the enemy's new line. Come around here, gentlemen. 3 miles deep, field fortifications, defences, artillery, the like of which we've never seen before. The 2nd are due to attack the line shortly after dawn tomorrow. They have no idea what they're in for. And we can't warn them. As a parting gift, the enemy cut all our telephone lines. Your orders are to get to the 2nd at Kwasi Wood, 1 mile southeast of the town of Auguste. Deliver this to Colonel Mackenzie. It is a direct order to call off tomorrow morning's attack.
It's a clip from 1917 in which you don't appear, George, but we chose it because it's.
I was going to say, that's all the talking in the film.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's more words than you had in the entire movie. But now you've had a few months, to step away from it, and away from the promotion, and away from the awards. I don't know. How do you look back on your experience there? It just must have been, just working with Sam Mendes and Roger Deakins, just an astonishing education.
Yeah, it was. It's a really profound experience. It was a year and a bit, basically. It was all of last year and a wee bit of the year before, the rehearsal, the shooting, and then of course the promotion of it and stuff. But most important was the process of making was the most amazing learning experience, because of the nature of how it was filmed and how it was made. There could never be a lead element. There was never a shot that was all about the lighting, or all about the acting, or all about the stunt. It was this constant flowing kind of mutual handoff between every department, and therefore to build every one of those shots that got pieced together into this one ginormous shot, everyone was present for every part of working it out. So I got to, we rehearsed for 6 months, and I got to be in production meetings. I got to to listen to a master like Roger discussing with Sam the way in which a camera, and understanding more about how a camera move can create an emotion to tell a story, and then as an actor, how you can facilitate that camera move, or how you can be inside of that shot, and what that can, your role inside of it was a greater understanding of my role inside of something else, and the way that, once you understand them sort of storytelling with, say, the camera move, how you can adjust your being to facilitate that, because in a sense then it might be our movement that then spins that camera shot, and it's like a dance between all, and then to facilitate those moves, the designer was present going, okay, so we'll move the room around this way, but actually for the tension of the scene we need the room to be narrower and longer, and all just simple things like that and Sam is just a master at that, from from all of his film and all of his theatre in also the rhythm of storytelling. That's what he talked about a lot, because we didn't have an edit. We had to, and the rhythm of each scene emotionally would dictate the length of the set. And we had, because of that, we had to decide upon those rhythms very early on. And just to be around all of those masters and makers all the time, and just to be a part of this mutual crew was extraordinary, and is really, really special to me that time.
Simon and I saw 1917 together. We saw it in a really lovely preview screening room with beautiful projection and fantastic sound, and it was. I felt it was a really theatrical experience. I've seen it again since on a small screen, and I think it still works. But I think it was primarily a theatrical experience, and it was great that it was released when it was, because 6 months later. Do you think that we will get that kind of filmmaking back any time in the near future? Because what you're describing sounds like everyone together in a huddle making a movie that is designed for the big screen experience.
I think it's a mixture of both. I think that's the thing, is we're going to have to meet the logistical requirements of how we get through this pandemic and the future from this point. But I think the requirement for films to be cinematic will be all the greater, because I think it will be a bit of a novelty. The cinema is going to be, for a time, it's going to take a wee while before cinemas are open again, and then even though we're desperate to get back in them, just that cinema experience, I think we're going to have to consider. There'll be so many people who I think see this as an opportunity in the way that, and it's a positive thing, I'm not knocking it when I say this, but like the way that things can be streamed and films can be watched at home, I think people will see that opportunity and look to jump on it, and perhaps make films more immediately and smaller budgets, and and there's positive things with that too. People taking chances on stories that they might not risk the budget on and things like that. But the films which are made for the cinema, I think, are really going to have to earn their spot in the cinema.
But with that streaming
cinematic experiences.
With that streaming thing, as you say, George, I mean, it makes me think, if only, Simon, there was a television program that was there to lead people through the new streaming world. Maybe one that you and I present starting tonight on BBC Four. I mean, it sounds to me like George is actually crying out for that. I think I'm paraphrasing what he just said, but I think that is what he just said. I think that's correct, George, isn't it? I'm correctly paraphrasing.
I think you took the words out of my mouth. I think that's pretty bang on.
That's pretty much bang on.
So George, with all your family, you need to gather around BBC Four. I don't know what you're planning to do tonight, but 8:30 BBC Four, you can gather around and you can be led by the hand into a whole new world.
That was exactly what I was planning. So I'll see you there.
George, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time and all the best. We look for whatever movies that you're going to be making in the future. We look forward to seeing them already. George, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks very much, guys. Have a good one.